Yes, I am Peter Alter, Chief Historian here at the Chicago History Museum. I'm not entirely sure what the chief means, but I am a trained historian, so that's a good start. Let's see, here we go. Okay. I won't start immediately with this, but we will at least have that up for something to look at. Just a brief introduction about the Chicago History Museum. We are an independent nonprofit organization. We've been located here in Lincoln Park since 1932. We were founded in 1856 and we are Chicago's oldest cultural institution. We have extensive holdings as they relate to U.S. history from the Revolutionary War era to Reconstruction, so about the century from the 1770s to the 1870s. Probably our most well-known artifact is Abraham Lincoln's deathbed. So I'm sure many of you have been here maybe several times before and over the various iterations of our existence. However, if you haven't seen it or you'd like to see it again, it is on the second floor. As Eva mentioned, we will have kind of a touchstone tour of Polonia in our galleries. So something I'm going to kind of do a little bit of research on later to set up. And we'll walk around and look where sort of Polonia is represented in our current exhibitions. We also, of course, have extensive research collections. We have something like 23 million items in our holdings. That includes, of course, artifacts, archives, photographs, and so forth. We are very excited to be hosting Paula today, so welcome here. I'm the official welcomer. So I've been here about 20 years, and in those 20 years, yes, I have worked a number of different positions. And my current, I have the chief historian, but also director of the Studs-Terkel Center for Oral History. Through the Studs-Terkel Center for Oral History, we conduct collaborative community-based oral history projects. Those projects often have a teen focus or a teen component to them. And so rather than really talk about Polonia's history, which all of you are very well versed, much more than I am, I'm really going to talk about our Poles in Chicago project, which is one of our current collaborative community-based oral history projects. That'll be about the first half or so of my presentation. Then the second half is really maybe a reminder to most of you, but also just a heads up, a nod to the various both online and in real life, as they say these days, collections that we have related to Chicago Polonia and Polonia more widely across the United States. And as Eva mentioned, certainly we'll take questions or comments at the end. And I will be around later, as Eva mentioned, for the tour that starts around 2:15. So if there's a longer conversation that you'd like to engage me in, I'd be happy to do that. I also will apologize a little bit ahead of time. We had, for our Muslims in Chicago project, we had an off-site program last night, and I didn't get home till about 10 o'clock. So I'm a little tired, so it's going to take me a little while to get my wheels turning, but I know by the end, or at least by the tour, I will be a little bit more awake than I am now. Okay, so our Poles in Chicago project began several years ago with a conversation between one of our vice presidents, John Russick, who sends his regrets that he couldn't be here today, but he arranged this venue and helped arrange the program and connected Eva and I together, so we appreciate him for that. He had a conversation with Robert Kostro of the Polish History Museum, Warsaw, several years ago, and I think it was really a conversation initiated by Robert himself. Of course, I'm sure many or all of you are aware that there will be a Polish History Museum within the next couple of years in Warsaw covering the vast sweep of Polish history. So fortunately here at Chicago History Museum, we only have about 150, 180 years to cover. So I'm also grateful for that. So that conversation took many different twists and turns. And eventually I moved into the position that I have now in 2015, and I was asked to get involved. My background is in immigration history, but sadly, at least for this project, not from Poland, actually from the Balkans. So I spent many years studying Serbian and Croatian and German for that work, which is only slightly applicable in vocabulary when I'm listening to Polish language oral histories. But I am the oral historian, or at least the director of the Studs Circle Center for Oral History here. And so I was asked to participate in the project. And we had kind of two phases in developing the idea for the project. We knew it would be an international collaboration between CHM and PHM, but also, of course, pulling in the Polish Museum of America, Loyola University Chicago's Polish Studies program, and other organizations and individuals along the way. We had a first, actually unsuccessful application to the MacArthur Foundation, their International Exchanges Grant, because what we had proposed was to recruit, hire, and train a group of 4 Polish-American high school students, bilingual in English and Polish, to conduct oral histories here, as well as in Poland. And MacArthur liked that, but they wanted to see something equivalent on the Polish side. So we resubmitted a year later, which I think was about 2 or 3 years ago, and were successful that second time. And so what we developed for this international exchange aspect of the project is essentially 2 mirroring groups of middle and high school students. High school students on our end, middle and high school students on the Warsaw end, to conduct oral histories both in English and Polish here in Chicago and also in Warsaw, and I'll get into that in a moment. What this will build to is obviously an exhibition. It will also create, as part of our online archive, a Poles in Chicago oral history project that will be represented by transcripts as well as oral history snippets from this collection. Those will be online with our other oral history projects, and will exist through the at least for the moment, through the Content DM platform. The goal, of course, as I mentioned, is an exhibition. The exhibition, at this point, we don't know exactly what the exhibition will look like or be. We don't know whether the exhibition will be something that opens here at Chicago History Museum. If it does open, it will definitely open here first, because they're very busy opening an entire museum in Warsaw. And so we would open the exhibition probably 2021, and then either travel that exhibition to Warsaw. There are some ideas that maybe and 2 exhibitions will open simultaneously, or 2 different style exhibitions will open, one here and one later in Warsaw at the Polish History Museum. So that's still very much in development. But what has been going now for quite some time is this international exchange. Just about a year ago now, through the Polish Saturday schools, we started to recruit applicants for Polish-American young people to first learn oral history methods and conduct oral histories here in Chicago in April, May, and June of last year, May and June, and then go on a trip to Warsaw, myself and 5 teenagers. got on a plane in late June and landed in Warsaw, and were there for about a week conducting oral histories. Of course, the oral histories that we conducted here were very much related to Chicago Polonia, and we are looking not only at more recent immigrants, but also displaced persons, of course, and Polish Americans who may be second, third, fourth, or more generations. And so it's a very sort of ecumenical project in that way. And so what we developed, and because we have a lot of youth-focused oral history that happens here, was a series of oral histories both here and in Warsaw in late June of 2018. So these slides are kind of multi-purpose. So you see us in the upper left-hand corner getting ready to leave from O'Hare. And of course, with the Polish History Museum not yet having a dedicated building, we were in their office spaces. So that's the upper right-hand corner, working on oral history methods. What we typically focus on, sort of in the vein of Stutz Terkel, who very much believe that you really just have to do oral history to learn how to do it. We have basically a half day, and by half day I really mean about 2-hour training, where we focus on active listening skills and creating questions and creating an environment for proper interaction between the oral history narrator or the interviewee and the interviewer. And so lower left-hand corner is a combination of Warsaw kids and Chicago kids, with actually our Loyola University Chicago student who was a near-peer mentor working with them to make sure that oral histories went smoothly. Of course, what we were looking for on the Warsaw side were interviewees or narrators who had returned to Poland. So had some connection to Chicago, but had returned to Poland for one reason or another. And then the lower right-hand corner, I know who it is, and maybe others sitting close can, but this particular narrator at the middle of the back of the frame, in the lower right-hand corner, is Mira Puach, of course, the Polonia bookstore owner, who recently sold her business and has returned to the Warsaw area. So she was a very interesting interviewee to discuss her time here in Chicago and why she decided to return to the homeland. And so that was really a very rich and rewarding experience. I know not everyone is super excited about working with high school students as oral historians. However, what we find, especially with a good mixture of introverts and extroverts, that the introverts really tend to focus on the research and the question writing, and the extroverts are really good at creating that atmosphere for a positive and productive interview. And so we've done this with a number of projects. The other project I mentioned, the Muslims in Chicago, we're about to recruit a very similar group, or have recruited, and we'll hire them soon. And we have a couple of ongoing West Side projects here in the city where we're doing a very similar thing, even with younger students. So we had, overall, we conducted 10 oral histories that were videotaped, and that will be used in different ways, of course, in the exhibition, and will definitely become part of the oral history archive online through chicagohistory.org, our website. Okay, and this is just a few views of Warsaw to get a sense. Obviously, the lower right hand is a mixture of, there were 8 students total from Warsaw, 4 from Warsaw and 4 from Chicago. And we saw the various sites over the course of a week at the end of June. So what was actually happening at the end of this coming June, so really 2 months from right now, the 4 students with whom we worked from Warsaw will be coming to Chicago with two mentors who are Polish History Museum staff, and we'll be conducting another set of interviews here in the Chicago area. Of course, what we've done in terms of languages, the interviews conducted here in the city and suburbs have been bilingual, and then the interviews in Poland were in Polish only. But all 8 kids are fluent speakers of both languages. So that's been, of course, a great help to us in terms of really pushing this project forward. It's been a lot of fun so far. Of course, taking myself and 5 teenagers to Warsaw was a little hair-raising, a little concerning, but we managed to stay out of trouble, except for the very last night when there was a little discussion with a transit cop on the subway in Warsaw, but we managed to get our way out of that. What I do have before I make the transition from this project to more general collections related to Bologna and Chicago are a few handouts and an audio clip, so I'm going to pass some of that out right now. And I know some of you who have are more familiar with our project might have seen this document before. So one of the questions that we really like and that the students really enjoy is, yeah, excuse me, I just started here. Bump that back. Is this question in terms of phrased in different ways. It might be actually phrased slightly different at the top of that handout than it is when we normally ask the question, what does being Polish mean to you? And so that really works nicely, especially for the youth oral historians, because it gives them an opportunity to reflect and think about what that means to them. Our 4 Polish kids were a combination of kids who were born here but parents born in Poland, or I think we had 2 and 3, 2 born here, 3 born in Poland. So some of them very much kind of identified with that immigrant generation, but as we know through immigration history, that those conflicts that come up amongst and between generations, beyond the normal conflicts that come up between parents and children. So we really enjoy that question. These are obviously the English language answers that were done about a year ago, and hopefully we'll be able to hear this. But I'm going to play essentially the transcribed part from Bogdan Okoryk's interview. So it might take me a second to figure out the volume here. Let's see if we can.
Polish means to me is knowing who you are, knowing your background, and knowing where you come from. I will So when the hard time will come, and you're gonna end up with your face in the sidewalk somewhere, and crying and wailing, know who you are, so you can get up on your knees, and somebody was gonna ask you who you are, and say, I'm from Poland, I'm Polish, and living in Chicago, and I'm a Polish Highlander, and this is what I do, and this is who I am, and this I believe will help anybody, help me, help my kids, or anybody to be able to stand up straight if hard times come.
That was, of the answers that we got, that was the favorite from the youth. Many of them definitely identified with that particular answer. Okay, so I'm going to kind of make a transition then, and let me grab my notes here for a second. We're going to make this transition now really just an overview of the kinds of materials that, since we have a group of the Polish American Librarians Association, thinking about the kinds of collections that we have, especially two-dimensional research collections. Of course, if you're not aware, I should have mentioned that we have a research library upstairs. It's essentially a special collections type library, closed stacks, where we serve our photographic collection, our architecture collection, our printed materials, and our archives. And of course we have, one of my previous jobs here was as the archivist, although I have no training as an archivist. We have about, of course, archives are not measured in this way, but we do have about 5 linear miles of archives here at the Chicago History Museum. So what I've put together is little bits and pieces. We have such a fabulous photographic collection that I just wanted to bring out some highlights, at least of the pieces that are digitized. So of course we have many hundreds of more images related to Chicago Polonia, but these are the digitized images that were kind of readily available when we put this presentation together. So this is, of course, St. Stanislaus Kostka Church, and it's a very nice, at least black and white rendition. We have, of course, many different kinds of photographic collections. This particular image comes from our master vertical files. So that means it's not part of a larger collection, but is cataloged essentially by the name of the house of worship. Okay, so this we picked this one out in particular. This is actually at Polish All Saints Cathedral during a World War I service banner raising. And this is actually part of our Chicago Daily News collection. So if you go to our online our online catalog, we actually have these digitized images available in that catalog. So these are totally searchable from the late 19th century through 1933 or 34. So there are many images of Polonia or of topics, subjects related to Polonia. This is also part of our master vertical files, a very famous image taken in the back of the yards in the early 1900s. We do have a collection of these wedding party photos. Unfortunately, most of them are unidentified. They came to us through one of our neighborhoods projects that covered actually the near west side, so the Maxwell Street Market community. I believe they came out of a photographer's studio, but there were a number of really striking images like that, of wedding parties. Of course, very clear. One thing I like about this is the nice focus on to the bilingual signs in the back. But these youngsters waiting outside the language school in circa 1910. This is a very interesting photograph. So you see this is Walter's Tavern, 1147 West 47th Street, so basically Racine and 47th in the back of the Yards neighborhood on the south side. So Walter was himself a Polish immigrant. I actually collected this and some other materials, including some beer glasses and shot glasses from Walter's Tavern. She as Walter's daughter, was very proud that Walter's Tavern was one of the few integrated pubs or saloons in the back of the Yards neighborhood in the 1930s. So you can see mostly Walter's family on the right and some African American and Polish American patrons on the left. So she was very, very proud of this. Of course, in a city that's known as one of the most segregated in the country, this was something that she was very proud of as part of her family's history. This is circa 1950s on the near northwest side of the city, kind of the ending of the Polish neighborhood in that era, and a street market, and captured, on a Saturday morning, I believe. This is also in the back of the Yards, the Polish Highlanders in the circa 1965. What's particularly interesting about where this comes from is for many years, the Chicago Area Camera Club, known by the acronym CACA, had a relationship with the Chicago History Museum where its members would flow throughout the city and take photographs for part of their competition every year, and some of the better photographs made their way into our collection. So this is an image from CACA, which of course covers everything from the Loop to the far south side and the far north side. So it's a real mixed bag. This is one of our kind of favorite images out of that particular collection. This is Pola Foods in 1988. Two women making pierogi for Pola Foods in the late 1980s. There was a project in the 1980s called Changing Chicago, and there were many images of Chicago that were like this that were taken for that particular effort. So just for those of you, a few of you who aren't aware totally of these kinds of resources that we have, just a few screenshots. Of course, there's the Encyclopedia of Chicago, which is online. There's a number, of course, of entries related to Polonia. This obviously is the main one. And the image in the upper left-hand corner is also from the Chicago Daily News collection. This is something that Eva referenced. This is the Chicago Cold War Oral History Project, which was actually one of the earlier projects that we did under the rubric of the Studs Terkel Center for Oral History, and I have a few handouts here for this as well, just some transcribed material. But we tried to be, again, as ecumenical in our approach as possible. So yes, we did interview a number of Poles for this particular project, but we, of course, interviewed Russians, Hungarians, people from Central and South America, people from Ethiopia who were fleeing the the communist revolution there in the 1980s and the famine. And so it's really an interesting juxtaposition of different Cold War experiences. So what's available online, like some of our future projects, or I should say unlike, there are full transcripts and full audio. We are kind of running out of space for the audio online. So going forward in the future, we'll be using just snippets. So you can hear and read the full oral histories here. And I have a few handouts related to that as well. And the handouts coming around are, we actually, at the time, just serendipitously at the time that we were conducting this project a few years ago, Lech Walesa was receiving an award from the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library Foundation. So our president arranged for an interview with him specifically related to Chicago Polonia. And it is in that kind of footnoted style, because that's actually training material that we used in Warsaw with the Chicago students and the Warsaw students. Then the other, obviously these are just excerpts. The other is an interview actually of a former dean at DePaul University who was Jewish and whose family and himself had significant Cold War experiences. And those are a couple of different snippets. Those snippets are actually also used for our training as well. Some for kind of the strength of the interview and some for kind of the opposite. And as I've mentioned several times, I am the director of the Studs Terkel Center for Oral History. So at the end of his career, the well-known self-styled DJ, historian, oral historian, journalist, TV personality, Studs Terkel was a scholar in residence here at the Chicago History Museum, then of course the Chicago Historical Society. And he came here when he retired from WFMT, which he was there for roughly 40 years, doing his well-known radio interviews, interviewing everyone from Nelson Algren to Martin Luther King to Mahalia Jackson and so forth. And so in a unique collaboration with WFMT, a couple of staff members there, and the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we have been in a kind of a three-legged process of digitizing the Studs Terkel audio tapes. So as part of his legacy when he came to us, we received about 7,000 to 8,000 of his tapes. And not long after we received them, a deal was struck with the Library of Congress to digitize them. So we ship our tapes to the Library of Congress for digitization. They get shipped back to us, and then the great staff at WFMT is doing all the coding, the cataloging, and the transcribing of Studs Terkel's interviews. So while I get to kind of use the name of Studs Terkel as a way to move forward in the vein of the kind of oral histories that he did, we also have WFMT working very diligently on various aspects of that collection. So you see I had my intern pick the Lyra Singers. Of course, there's many other interviews that he did related to Polonia in Chicago, Polonia in the United States, and of course Poland. But that one was one that caught my particular eye there. And then just a nod to our online catalog, and this is just one of hundreds of hits that will come up for Polonia, Poland, Polish, and so forth in our catalog. But this is Christopher House, a settlement house you can see there at basically Ashland and Fullerton, not too far from here, 1618 West Fullerton. So serving many communities in the early to mid 20th century, but of course including the Polish community. That's, and this also is where you can see examples of those Chicago Daily News images that I mentioned. One last is not our product, but certainly lots of research was done here at the Chicago History Museum. This is the online encyclopedia, which also has a hard copy presence from around 2000 called earlychicago.com. And we picked this particular entry just to highlight it as an available online resource. One other project that we did actually when I started here in 1999 was a project called Global Community, Chicago's Immigrants and Refugees. And we focused on several recent, and we were defining recent as post-1945 immigrant and refugee groups. So we looked at Polish immigrants, for example, on the northwest side, coming since the fall of communism, Mexican community on the southeast side, Cambodian and Vietnamese refugees on the north side, and so forth. So that collection will eventually, actually, part of the print collection of that documenting effort will become part of our archives very soon. But that was an effort to expand our collections around those particular groups and really focused on archival collection, new photography taking, and oral history collecting. And I actually have, I won't pass it around because I'm just about done and we don't need to shuffle more paper at this point. But I have an off-print of a couple of interviews from that collection if you want to pick that up at some point later today. Let me also just mention one more thing about us, a publication that I brought in. This is our quarterly publication called Calendar, so we have plenty over here and they're filtered throughout the museum. But if you're not familiar with us, this is a good way to get familiar with us. If you know us and want to get to know us better, this is a great way to do so. This comes out, as I said, 4 times a year and really details the exhibitions as well as the public program offerings. Of course, our website is as up to date as can be, chicagohistory.org. But if you want to learn more about us, this is a great way to do that, and these will be available. So I'm at the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, comments, queries, if there are any.